we're learning in real time. It's messy and it's uncomfortable and it hurts sometimes because I say dumb shit. All of us are ignorant at the end of the day, but there's no conversation taking place where we can learn how to hold space for each other. So that's what we're doing now. But it's about learning. And I think at its core, every man wants to be better. And if we flip it on its head and we use the same terminology in the system, the masculine traits that we are told we need to have in order to feel X enough, man enough, and we flip them on their heads and we use them to go in and to explore, like I say in my TED Talk, our hearts, explore the things that aren't working, then you actually find the answers are inside of us.
Hello, friends. This is the Let's Give a Damn podcast. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. On this show, I chat with people who are living meaningful lives, people who give a damn. If you love this show, please hit subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or follow us on Spotify. It would mean the world to me. My guest today is, drum roll please. Okay, fine. No actual drum roll, but know that this guest deserves a drum roll. My guest today is the incredible Justin Baldoni. Justin is most well known for his role as Raphael on Jane the Virgin, or maybe you know Justin from his incredibly popular docuseries called My Last Days, a fascinating series about living and dying. Over the past few years, Justin has done a lot more directing than acting. He made 5 Feet Apart in 2019, Clouds in 2020. And a couple of years ago, Justin founded Wayfarer, a TV and film studio whose mission is to develop and finance projects that can serve as true agents for social change. And if all that wasn't enough, Justin founded Man Enough a couple of years ago as well. Man Enough is a movement founded on the belief that by undefining traditional roles and traits of masculinity, men will be able to realize their potential as humans and their capacity for connection. Man Enough began as a web series and is now developed into an incredible book, which launches 1 week from the release of this podcast conversation. It releases on April 27. Please pause this podcast right now. If you're listening in the week leading up to that, pause this podcast right now and go pre-order Man Enough immediately. And as always, I encourage you to order from your local bookstore. Skip the big box stores. Go to manenough.com/books right now to learn more about the book and to find out where you can buy signed copies of the book. And while we're on the topic of Man Enough, Justin gave a great talk at TEDWomen in 2017 called Why I'm Done Trying to Be Man Enough. It's been viewed millions and millions of times, and it's a must-watch for absolutely everyone. I'll have the link in the show notes, or you can just Google it. Before my chat with Justin a couple of weeks ago, I read an advanced copy of Man Enough and found it fascinating and incredibly helpful. In my conversation with Justin today, we talk about family, parenting, masculinity, obviously. We briefly go through each section of the book. We talk about spirituality and so much more. Bottom line, my friends, Justin Baldoni is an absolutely stunning human and damn giver, and I can't wait for you to hear our conversation. Before we jump into this conversation, a quick reminder that you can anytime and for any reason email me at hello@letsgiveadamn.com. I love hearing from you. And now, let's get right into my conversation with the amazing Justin Baldoni. Let's go. Justin Baldoni, welcome to the Let's Give a Damn podcast. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm good. I'm happy we're finally doing this.
Same here. It's been a couple years in the making, and I am I'm a huge fan of who you are, what you do, and I'm excited that we get to. I've heard you talk about all of your stuff in other, interviews and stuff, but I'm glad we get to talk about it because there's things that I want to know, and so I get to. This is my hour to ask you what I want.
Hey, buddy, this is your hour. You can ask anything you want.
Well, I will take you up on that. Let's start super light though, because this has been a hell of a year. We're still in a pandemic. I said super light and then talked about
Hold on, wait, yeah, I was going to say, you want to start super light with the pandemic?
Well, I was going to ask about your family and different things like that, but then I was like, oh shit, we're in the middle of a pandemic still. Okay, so this year you went from being out and about, making all sorts of stuff, like probably, I don't know, were you even with all your busy schedule, were you at home quite a bit, or were you out quite a bit? And then when you were home, you were trying to be like really present. What was that arrangement before the pandemic started?
Well, before the pandemic started, I was never home.
Right. You were filming in Canada or something, right?
Well, before the pandemic hit, I had directed my last film, Clouds, which, so we were all in Montreal, Quebec, for about 4 months, I think. And then before that, I was on Jane the Virgin.
Yep.
So that ended in May. So I had a little break between Jane and Clouds, but I was also building a new company.
Right.
So to answer your question, when I was home, it was like, how can I be present? And then the pandemic hit and everything changed for us because I was finishing Clouds. So I had to start finishing Clouds at home. And so we were basically like inventing all of the ways to finish a big movie from home.
Yeah.
And that was challenging. And then I also, I had to finish my book. So then the book deadline came. And so I was basically home, but I was locked away in our, we had a really sweet, we just moved to the country, but we built this really sweet home right in the middle of the city. And it was tiny. It was, it's 2,000 square feet. And in a house that's small, you can't get away. So, I was tucked in our little, 10 by 12 guest room.
Yep.
With like a desk against the window. I got one of these like little window desks where you essentially like with suction cups put it against the window.
Right? I've seen those. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like on Shark Tank, right?
Yep. I've seen that one.
Yeah. I'm a sucker for that stuff, man. I'm like, in that house, I was like, okay, how can I be a minimalist, but also have everything that I need in this house? But the problem was that like, the kids were like 10 feet away. And so it was really challenging because daddy was home, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
So not that we're starting nice and light, but it was a lot, man. It was a really, really hard, tricky thing. And also like just the process of writing a book is just, it's like, it's therapy, on acid. So you're just pouring your heart out into these pages and all the while thinking like, you suck, you can't do this. No one's going to read your book. Why are you doing this?
Time, right. Yeah.
So it was quite a process, man, on top of the fear and, wiping down all the anything that comes in the house and not seeing anybody. It was just a lot. So,
and a book is different. Correct me if I'm wrong. At least I have a lot of writer friends, and I'm in the middle of writing a book right now. Well, that's a lie. I'm in the middle. I'm at the beginning stages and having a hell of a time getting like really into it.
Yeah.
But I'm in the middle of it, and I have lots of friends who have written books, and there's something different about writing. Like obviously you've made films and you've been in shows and stuff. There's a permanence there, right? It's always out there. But books are different. It's like it's a printed thing that even if there are revisions, maybe you said something really stupid in this one and they fix it later. Those however many thousands of copies with that mistake in there, it's out there. You can never get that back. So I'm sure that's part of it.
Are you trying to make me feel better?
No, your book, your book's amazing. My point is,
all I can think of is you're naming all of my anxiety, and I'm like, yeah, that's actually exactly how it is. You're like, wow, did we all miss the typo? Oh, did I actually feel that? Do I feel that way now? And look, I reserved the right in the book to change my thoughts and feelings as 100%. I'm on a journey,
right?
And it's something actually something I learned from watching Glennon Doyle and something she does and did.
Yeah.
But yes, of course, it's different than a movie. Now, with my movies, I pour my heart and my soul into them. I think it's one of the reasons why they work in the way that they do, because they make you feel. And my goal is to make people feel. But so much of the movies is me. But it's different because movies are I'm the conductor, right? I'm the actors and the cameras. These are all instruments in my symphony. The book, there is no protection. It is just me.
Right.
It is written word, printed. These are my thoughts and feelings. This is my shit. And the whole book also is an exploration of vulnerability.
Totally.
So on top of that, I like the idea of like, okay, I can already think of 10 things that I wish I didn't put in the book because in 2 months I've changed. So it was a lot, and I tried to get out of it multiple times. I'm not gonna lie. I was like looking for any possible way that I could sabotage needing to finish writing the book, so that I didn't have to put this out in the world. But at the end of the day, the reason I did it was out of service, and it was because I just believed it could be useful and helpful. Because I never had a book like this to read. I never had this modeled, so it was therapeutic. It was for myself. It was for the world, and that's what kept me on it. But boy, did I want to, I want to back out of it multiple times.
No, the book it's the perfect time for it. I really believe that. Obviously, 10 years ago would have been a great time to talk about being man enough as well. And in the future, it'll be the same thing. But right now, I mean, I'm thinking in real time. I'm thinking just 2 days ago, a young man murdered 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian women. And right away, right? You see the conversation happening in the media. You see certain people trying to downplay what happened. He just had a sexual addiction, and this.
He had a bad day, right?
He had. Oh my God!
Day.
I literally,
bad day for him.
I got physically sick to my stomach when I heard that sheriff, who now it's come out that he's like posted stuff about the China virus. He posted a picture of a shirt about China brought this over here. So you kind of get his mindset, right? Kind of Georgia wearing a China t-shirt. Like it, of course he's going to downplay that and say the kid just had a bad day and this is what he did. But you're looking at a 21-year-old young man who was in an environment that obviously, I don't know anything about this kid other than what we've seen. And I'm trying not to think about him nearly as much as I'm thinking about the victims, but you have to see already that he was in an environment that did not teach him how to be an actual real man, the kind of man you and I are talking about today, right? Because he was right? Like maybe he did have some sort of compulsion toward pornography and sexual exploits or whatever, but he lived in such a shame-filled environment that he had to hide it and go back to it and hide it and go back to it and figure out ways around it. And I don't know, we don't know everything about the situation yet, but everything that happened came from him. I think him not being taught the kinds of stuff you're talking. Like if he had this book 2 years ago, I would love to believe that this would not have happened.
And you know what? And who knows if you would have read it at the end of the day. And you were right. I think we need to spend as little time talking about these people and these types of men as possible, because in many ways, it's what they want.
Right.
We're giving them what they want. And really the focus should be on these 8 people whose lives were taken. And that's just the way that the sensational media works, is we spend all the time talking about the person who does it, not any time talking about the person who was done too. And we do the same thing with women, right? We do the same thing with, even in our language, we do the same thing with rape and sexual assault. And look, and who knows, man? I don't know if the book could have helped somebody like that. I wrote this thing for guys in the middle. There's always going to be people on the fringes, and you can't reach everybody. And despite my altruistic and distorted, view that like, oh, maybe I can, the reality is I can't.
Yeah.
But if you look at the middle, the group of men who are aware enough to know that something isn't working for them, who are aware enough to know that they do have feelings that they can't express, or they don't know why they get angry about certain things, or they don't know why they interrupt the women in their lives or talk down to certain women, or why they struggle with certain things, or why they can't ask for help, or what their resistance is to therapy, or whatever it is. There are so many men right in the middle that are open, that are good men who want to become better men, better humans, better husbands, better fathers, better friends. These are the men that I am looking to reach and looking to talk to. You can't change everybody. I'm not even trying to change anybody. The purpose and the reason why I wrote Man Enough is because at the end of the day, we have to start having conversations about the barriers that we build and the armor that we put on that prevents connection with other people, and more importantly, with ourselves. And for so long, we have been living at a time, in a place, in a culture that teaches us as boys that we have to put on armor that we don't even realize we have on by the time we hit puberty. And that armor is the very thing that prevents us from living truly fulfilling, happy lives, that prevents us from developing our emotional IQ, from building compassion and empathy. Right? It's the thing. It's the block. It's the mask that we put on. And and look, a lot of who knows? Maybe there are young boys and men, which is one of the reasons why we're going to turn Man Enough. We are turning Man Enough into a book for 9 to 12-year-olds as well.
Love it.
Because that's where you reach those men. That's where you reach the boys, before they turn into the guys that have had to repress their feelings for so long and are so misunderstood and have white privilege and think that the world owes them something and that they are the victims. And then, they have all of this rage because that's the only socially acceptable thing they're allowed to have. And eventually they become one of the mass shooters, because we know, for one thing, all of them are white men.
Yeah.
And then they do something like that. Well, you reach them when they're 9. You reach them at that age. You don't reach them when they're 2 years before they're going to do something like that, because they're too far gone at that point. What we need then is just better laws. These people shouldn't have access to these things. But before that, it's about teaching men that who they are as they are is enough.
I'm so glad you went there, because that was one of the first places I wanted to start. Was this is obviously for men, and I'm also glad that you made that distinction. I can't save anyone. I can't reach everybody. I'm trying to go for those men in the middle, those that are willing to hear. Right? That's a great observation, because there are people there are men that are not going to read this book. The second one, what you just said is the secret. And I'm so glad you're going to make this book for young boys and young men. Because I'm thinking about my son, who is 6. I have a 6, a 7, and an 8-year-old, all the 3 kids. And
wow, you were busy.
Yeah, we were. We're finished being busy now. In that way, now we're just crazy busy taking care of 3 kids that are that close together. But it's all about that. When I started Let's Give a Damn 4 years ago, I had tons of parents coming out of the woodwork saying, "Okay, this is cool. This Let's Give a Damn thing. You're going to be reaching tons of people with your message and all that. But what about kids? How can we get Let's Give a Damn for kids?" Because I feel like my job is, and maybe this
Let's give a darn.
Well, let's give a darn. That's right. And it is, I am helping adults undo a lot of shit that they learned growing up. Right? That's all I'm doing, is helping people rewire their brains and their hearts and their souls. With kids, though, they're sponges. They're ready to go. My kids are incredible. They love people so well. They are at peace with what's going on around them. They give a damn. They want to help out. They love people. And that's what I want for all the kids, right? So same thing with this whole man enough thing is like, how about boy enough? Like, if you learn that when you're younger, you're going to save yourself a world of trouble later on.
Yeah. It's this idea that boys, instead of saying boys will be boys, we should be saying boys will be human. And that's really and that's what the message is going to be for the younger boys. But
I love it. So before we get into, I want to go through the book, sort of like, not methodically, but I want to get into your brain and how the book sort of developed. There's really good stuff in there. Before we get there, though, this has been a multi-year journey, right? Because Man Enough is not just a book. It's been, if anybody's followed your sort of journey over the last few years, maybe not starting with the 2017 TED Talk, but maybe that's where it started. I don't know. You tell me, but to walk us through this journey of when you started having these conversations. It was a TED Talk, and then it was a TV show, and you had these conversations. I watched them, when they came out year or two ago, and they were just, they were like a breath of fresh air. And so it's been this long journey. So why this topic, and what's the journey been like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Man Enough the journey has been parallel to my journey. So I just decided to take the journey in real time. And, I just happened to have a little bit of, whatever the hell you call it. I was on a TV show, so you have followers and some celebrity or influence or whatever. But I was just questioning things. I had just become a father. I was thinking about what equality looks like. I was thinking about the world. I'd just gotten married a few years before that. And my wife and I had our struggles. A lot of them, were because of my own barriers and the issues that I was trying to unpack and unlearn from, my parents and my father, and that was passed down from his. And I was just kind of thinking about this whole thing and realizing that there isn't a human being on this planet that's untouched by masculinity and by some of the pitfalls of it. And then, of course, there's this polarizing political conversation, which I have no interest in being a part of, which is I'm just really interested in learning. I'm trying to understand and listen to what everybody's saying. Why are men so resistant? And why are women so angry? Why? And you start to like listen and observe, and you take stock of your own stuff, and you realize that there is a bigger thing at play here. There's this invisible force that's governing our actions, and we don't even realize it. And so many of the problems, and this is my deduction, so many of the problems that exist in the world can be traced back to the intersection of masculinity and racism. And now I'm at the place where I realize that you can't really separate the two. The world has been, especially in America, like we're positioned to look at things from this patriarchal, white supremacic view of the world, because the system is built to benefit folks that look like you or I. And also that very same system that's causing so many people pain, so many women and people of color and gender nonconforming and non-binary folks and trans people. That same system that's literally killing people and hurting other people is also hurting me. But it's hurting me in different ways. It doesn't work for anybody. And that's what I've learned is, this idea of me being a pussy or me being a girl or me being gay, a homophobic slur, if I'm not this thing, causes like damage, irreparable damage.
Yep.
That stays with us for our entire lives, that influences our actions, it governs our very existence, but yet we don't name it or call it a thing because it isn't a thing to those of us that have privilege. It's just the way the world works, right? And really, the people that say that are the people that benefit the most from it. Everybody else is screaming from the top of their lungs, this isn't working for me. Women are screaming from the top of their lungs, like, we just want to be able to walk to our cars and not be raped.
Right.
But yet 1 in 4 of us will in our lifetime. And that's not including like just assault. And if you look at, and that's just white women, if you look at the numbers for Black and brown and people of color and trans people, you're like, you just have a really good shot at just, almost everybody is. So again, like, people have been screaming, hey, we just want to be valued. We just want to be safe. We just want the right to vote. I mean, just think about history. It's not that long ago.
Yep.
It's really not that long ago that Black folks had the right to vote, that women had the right to vote.
Right.
We are like, so the idea that we've just like made it, that we've just like, oh, we're just arrived. We're here now. Everything's fine. History is history. It's history. We don't have to. No. Our grandparents were a part of that.
Yeah.
That's passed down. That's just one generation passed down to us. So it's in all of us. And the system benefits the folks that look like you and me. And so for me, I'm like, wow, the system is working for me. It's working in my advantage in many ways. But at the same time, I'm miserable. I'm suffering. Like, I'm not happy because I feel like I have to acquire more and be more successful and have this and this and this. That's not just capitalism. That's also, that's masculinity and the patriarchy.
Yep.
And the intersection of the two of them. I'm not as happy in my marriage because I don't feel like I'm able to be truly vulnerable. I don't have any guy friends that really know me. I'm getting lonelier. Like, why can't I be vulnerable? What's the reason why I don't want to go to therapy? Like, oh my God, I have a predisposition to like some sort of addiction or a use of pornography I didn't even know that I had growing up. Wow, I didn't realize I was medicating when I was 16 years old. When I was like, all of these things, all of these thoughts that are just everywhere. They were, for me, they were all kind of locked into this puzzle about 5-6 years ago, where I looked at it and said, oh, my entire life is affected by this thing. And it governs everything that I do. It influences every decision that I make. And it does that for me, the person who has the most to gain and benefit from the system. Then what is it doing to everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really took me on this journey. So it started with coming up with a show called Man Enough, which was a roundtable show.
Mm-hmm.
And I started shooting that right before Harvey Weinstein hit, and the Me Too moment and movement kind of resurged
Sure.
with Toronto Burke, and so I was already doing the show, and then of course TED asked me to speak, and I did the TED Talk, and then that became this large thing, and it's been seen all over the world, and I feel so grateful. But again, even the TED Talk, I wasn't ready for it. I wanted to back out of it. I didn't think, let a woman do it. I what do I have to say? What do I have to offer? But I understood, and what they explained to me was, by being in the position of privilege that I'm in, and by using my voice as a straight white man and talking about these things, it was a service, and that's why I did it. And then from there, I just kept talking about it, and I think we shot five or six episodes of Man Enough. It was a digital series. It was like we had some branded content partners that never made it to TV. Our intention was to meet people where they were, and people saw it and they liked it. But we recognized that like women were watching it more than men, or men were watching it through women. It wasn't. Sure. It wasn't this thing that was going viral with men. And then we also learned why, and so we studied it. We talked about it, and then eventually, I got approached with a book offer, and I didn't want to do it. I eventually did it, and I kind of delayed it until I could delay it more. That's where we got to now. But the journey for me has been learning in real time. So all along that way, whether it was just taking account and stock of all of the things and what I was feeling, to doing the show, to doing the TED Talk, to writing the book. Now I'm doing a podcast, which is super intense. I'm doing the Man Enough podcast, and I have two co-hosts, and we're talking with activists and celebrities, and we're learning in real time. It's messy and it's uncomfortable and it hurts sometimes because I say dumb shit. Yeah. All of us are ignorant at the end of the day, but there's no conversation taking place where we can learn how to hold space for each other. And so that's what we're doing now, but it's about learning. And I think at its core, every man wants to be better.
Yep.
And if we use the same, if we flip it on its head and we use the same terminology in the system, the masculine traits that we are told we need to have in order to feel X enough, man enough, and we flip them on their heads, and we use them to go in and to explore, like I say in my TED Talk, our hearts, explore the things that aren't working, then you actually find the answers are inside of us. We can be brave enough to listen and hold space, right? We could be strong enough to ask for help. It's all here, and that's the journey that I've been on, and that's kind of what's led us to where we are.
So much to go back and touch on, but I'll try to be careful because we don't have a ton of time. Going back to the TV show that ran for a few episodes, you said that you all found out pretty quickly that a lot of women were watching it, or that the many men that were watching it through their partners, their spouses, or whatever. And you said you did some research as to why. Like, so what were some of the things that came up? Let me tell you what real quickly before you say it, like, as I'm thinking about it, as you tell me that, I'm a different kind of guy. So I love that shit. And like, I'm super into it. But if even looking back on how I was raised as a young man, it was very much the traditional, John Wayne masculinity, right? Which is like, eat meat, go hunting, like,
don't complain,
don't whine, work hard, just shut up and do it. And definitely don't cry, don't share your feelings, that sort of a thing. So I would guess that if most men that I know came from that, and they're in their journey, some like it, some are still in it, but a lot of them are trying to get out of it. But I would imagine that seeing some of those conversations happening might push them away because they don't know, not that they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't know how. They don't have a fucking clue how to open up and be that vulnerable. They're scared of what people will say. They're scared of what people will think. They're scared of what people will find out about their past or what they've done or how they're doing stuff now. It's a whole mess, I'm sure.
I mean, that was a part of it. I think that, it was a first shot. No one had really done what we were doing. And I was, again, using myself as the entry point, and similar to the book, using kind of my stuff as a way to like let people in. But at the end of the day, the biggest issue I think that we had with that show was that everybody agreed. And it's like, it was a bit aspirational, like it was like good looking kind of entertainment people sitting around a table talking. And I think for a lot of American men, that could feel like out of touch. And that, and we did our best, and I reached out to people I knew, and, I funded that thing on my own at first and risked my company because I'm like, I just believe that this needs to happen. And look, we can't reach all men, and that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
We're never going to reach everybody, and we're never going to reach everybody at once. And, and I looked at that, and it did a lot of good. But at the same time, men are not going to rush into like how to have uncomfortable conversations with themselves or their other men. It's not like, of all of the things that I think a man thinks about during the day, that's not one of them. And so why would they consume that content? You don't think about it until you have to.
Sure.
Because honestly, we're busy with a lot of other stuff for the most part. I mean, trying to provide all the pressures, all the things that we're talking about in the show. These are the things that are in the back of our mind. It's life and death for a lot of men out there in the world right now. What's going to make, like, they're not going to sit down and watch 5 dudes talking about their feelings, and that's fine. And I recognize that. So that's why now we're doing the podcast. It's why I wrote the book. People listen to audiobooks now. You can spend 30 minutes here. You can spend an hour there. You can have, I know commutes aren't the thing at the moment.
Right.
But also I think men like to listen to things in private. There's an element of something that could be embarrassing if somebody catches you watching something, or you comment, like, as an example, when the TED Talk came out, women were sharing it like crazy.
Yeah.
Proud of it. Men, the only thing they shared generally was to insult me or bash it.
Oh, interesting.
Privately, they messaged me. And again, image is everything. The perception of what it means to be a man. It's the performative aspect of masculinity. Privately, I was getting thousands of messages.
Wow.
Publicly, I was getting thousands of negative messages. And that's the whole thing. Masculinity is the very thing. It's the invisible force that causes us to act different than we feel. So, like, we're just looking at this and we're saying, okay, well, the way to reach men is privately, by creating an intimate experience with them, or through the women in their lives that they care about, that are worried about them. And I don't care how we reach them. I just want to reach them. So that's what we're doing now. We're creating alternative ways. There's a book, there's a podcast, there's going to be other versions of the show and of shows or podcasts that are really targeted to people that represent the demographic or the sexual orientation of somebody or the race of somebody, so that they can hear from for someone that looks and feels like them, not from this like privileged white dude, what it means to be a man. Because what it means for me to be a man is going to be very different than what it means for my best friend Jamie, who's a black man, and he's 51. Some of it is, there's intersections. It's the same forces, but our experiences are vastly different.
Right.
And so these are all just things that we're learning. And again, at the end of the day, we just want to be helpful. We just want to be of service. We want men to be happier, to feel better, to treat the people in their lives better. We want men to not kill themselves at the rates that they're killing themselves. We want men to show up for the women in their lives so the women don't die at the rates that they're dying.
Yep.
It affects everybody. And the butterfly effect, I believe, of touching one man and having him recognize these forces and be aware and take account of his actions and go deep and understand the process of what it means to be vulnerable and get help or go to AA, whatever that is. That butterfly effect, I don't think is measurable or quantifiable, because that one man interacts with how many people in a day, how many women in his lifetime. And that's the work, man. That's why we're doing it.
Well, and I want to affirm at least as a spectator on this journey the last 3 or 4 years, I have seen everything that you've done around Man Enough, whether it's the TED Talk or the show and now the book and other things. It all feels, and I'm not just saying this, it all feels like bathed in humility. It all feels like we're sharing, like Justin and these other men are sharing their experience, who they are, what they're doing, what they're learning, but none of us have it figured out. And I think that's been the key to success so far, and will be the key to success even in this book and in the podcast, I'm sure, is we want to help you unlearn all this bad, terrible shit that you've learned in your life. We want you to view masculinity differently, but we're not saying we have figured it all out and we don't have
No.
the way, right? Especially now, I think you talked about your Black friend, Jamie, 51 years old, totally different experience. Today, it seems like a really interesting time in history to have this conversation, because being a man looks totally different for so many different. I mean, you have gay men, you have trans men, you have different skin colors and ethnic backgrounds and experiences.
Yeah.
So you have to like approach this. And again, I'm affirming that I think you do this to the best of your ability, at least what I can tell. You have to approach this very like, here are some things that I think apply to everybody that identifies as a man and that kind of has this masculinity about them. But you have to you have to take all this in and process it for yourself to figure out what it means for you, right?
Well, the whole point of the book is to undefining masculinity instead of redefining it simply means to make space for anybody who identifies as a man.
Yep.
Because the invisible line that is drawn before we're born, the box that we're put into, by redefining it, would mean that that line has to keep being redrawn. And I have no interest in redrawing that line. I just want it to be gone. I think we have to remove the line, get rid of the box. And if you are a man and you identify as a man, then you are a man. You don't have to try to be anything else because you already are. And that's the message of the book. That's the point of the book. And yes, to your point, the experience looks incredibly different for every man. That's why I'm not your teacher and I'm not your guru. I'm not going to sell you a business class or hey, here's this special thing with me on how to be a better man. I have no interest in that. I don't have time for that. I want to make my movies and build my company. With this, it's, hey, this is the shit that happened to me. This is what didn't work for me. And this is how it affected me. I'm sure you have a similar story. And what I found is it doesn't matter if it's a trans man or a gender non-conforming person or a Black man or a Middle Eastern man, someone who's 50 or someone who's 20. What I'm seeing is the themes are universal. The things I talk about in the book, the things that have happened to me, they're all universal themes. The outcome or the experiences might be different, but I'm sharing my story as an invitation for you to take a look at yours. And if you can take a look at your story and be like, oh shit, that happened to me. Oh, I had a similar experience to that. Oh, well then what else happened? And it'll start to get your brain moving. And again, and I say this early on, I don't believe masculinity is toxic. I love being a dude. I love being a man. But I also don't want to be a man and have to disown the parts of me that are also considered feminine, because those are also parts that I love of myself. I don't want to have to kill off those parts. Bell Hooks talks about the act of psychic self-mutilation that men have to perform on ourselves in order to be seen as men. We have to kill off a part of our humanity, part of our sensitivity, our compassion, our empathy, in order to be seen as a real man. Because we're, as men, like the way you were raised, we're not allowed to show our feelings. We're not allowed to suck at something. We're not allowed to ask for help. Right? You just learn by figuring it out. Just do it.
Yep.
You're not allowed to, cry when you skin your knee. So where does all that pain go? Where does all the doubt and the anxiety go? It goes somewhere. And then yet we wonder why white men, 21-year-old white men, go and kill people in mass shootings. Well, that's where it goes. It's pain. It's unexpressed pain and sadness and loneliness. It's why men kill themselves. It's why they do these terrible things. It's why they rape. It's why they sexually assault. It's why they hurt each other. We're all affected by the same shit. And we got to call it out. And again, it's not toxic, but that shit left unexpressed becomes toxic. A cancer cell is no problem. We have them in our bodies until
we all have them. Yep.
Until one day a trigger happens. And then suddenly, whether it's because of anxiety or pain or frustration or whatever we're dealing with, stress, something happens in the body, and then that cancer cell can reproduce, and that's when it becomes true cancer. Sure, sometimes it happens on accident or it just happens in the body, but there's a trigger. Our body, something happens. And the same thing happens with masculinity.
So I want to quickly, I don't want to give away too much from the book because I want everybody listening to buy it, and we'll push it as hard as we can. But I want to
appreciate it.
I want to read the chapter titles real quickly because I think it's a really interesting and I think helpful progression. Then I want to ask two questions about the book. One is I want you to talk about and I'll tell you now, just so in case you have to think about it, I want you to talk about your favorite chapter, that whether it was the content of the chapter, or your favorite one to write, to really like get out, right? But I also, and maybe they're the same one, but I want to spend time on the dad enough, raising children when I'm still growing up chapter, right?
Sure.
That's important for me. And for the demographic, we have all kinds of people listening to the show, but most of them are millennials, somewhere in there. Lots of them are raising small kids. And there are a lot of dads. Like, it is still mostly women listen to this podcast, but it is a lot of dads that are listening. And
Great.
So
hi, women and dads.
Yeah. I like, exactly. And so I'll start with that. What was your favorite chapter to write and why?
Oh, my favorite chapter to write. I liked writing Loved Enough. I have a lot of thoughts about love and dating and marriage. I'm also in it, man. I mean, I'm married.
Yep.
We've been married. My wife and I have been together for 9.5 years. So I'm in it. I liked writing that. I liked writing the dad chapter. The problem is, though, man, the book is, each chapter is its own book. And it was a real big challenge because, again, like, dad enough is only a portion of my experience as a father. I don't even get into my son really, and raising two children. And, there's so much more there. And I had to just kind of commit to just a part of the experience. And so I chose to focus on the part that leads up to it more than being in it.
Sure.
But I enjoyed writing. There's parts of every chapter I enjoyed writing.
Sure.
I enjoyed writing Loved Enough. The body image chapter I enjoyed writing because it was nice to be able to get my story out in a way that wasn't like, because every time I talk about body image or butt muscle dysmorphia, everyone's always like, oh, boo-hoo. Oh, you're fine. Oh, look at you.
Yeah.
And it was nice to just be able to write without having to like interrupt somebody and be like, dude, let me just tell my story.
Right.
I'm insecure. Or like, I got, I'm 10 pounds heavier, 12 pounds heavier than I normally am, and then have someone be like, oh, you can't even see it. You're fine. Right. That's the thing. That's this thing that we do in our culture. But again, I also have to recognize that I look a certain way and I have privilege. And so I can't just complain to everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love it. So let's just for a minute or two, I know we've already talked about it even at the beginning and then just now a little bit, but let's spend just a minute or two because it's also the Dad Enough chapter speaks to me. So many of them did. I mean, you mentioned the one about body image. Like that's something that I have had to deal with as I've gotten older is not making excuses for, the weight I've gained. Like when before married, I was chiseled as a motherfucker, like worked out 2.5 hours. Like I was in the best shape of my life. And then I got married and we were poor at the time. So I was going to school full time, working full time. We weren't making a lot of money. So I was eating terrible food. 12 years ago, we weren't thinking about the future. We were thinking about surviving now. And then we started having kids a couple years after that. And here we are, right? Like I'm not who I was 12 years ago, right? And I think about it all the time, right? But I've also had these really beautiful, sweet moments where I am really grateful for who I am. And I look at my body and I look at who I've become. And I'm just happy that this journey has brought me here. And I'm not like, I'm fine. Like I'm fine with where I'm at. Yes, I would love to carve out more of my day to work out and spend more time on myself. I work way too much. I stay up too late. I get up too early. There's a lot going on in life right now. I have way too much going on, but I had those moments of beauty and that chapter has helped me. And I hope it continues to help me and others. Like, just realize that I am like just as I am. Now in 2 years, I'd love to be in better shape because I want to be around for the next 40, 50 years, right?
There's nothing wrong with goals.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with setting goals for yourself and desiring something.
Yeah.
It's just, but it's when if our physical body and the way that we look or the way that we perceive that other people think that we look is dictating our sense of self-worth and happiness, then that's the problem.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with having a goal or wanting, like it's just about asking yourself why, like I talk about in the book, the why ladder. It's like, if you ask yourself why you want to look good, okay, well, it could be just because you want to look good again. It could also be because you want to be able to have energy to run around with your kids. And you think that by working out and looking good, it's going to give you that energy. It doesn't matter what the answer is. So long as you don't look in the mirror every day and feel terrible about yourself and talk shit to yourself.
Yeah.
And have that like dictate your sense of self-worth or happiness. That's the thing. So goals are great. We need goals. I'm all for goals, but it's just about like, why are we doing the things that we're doing?
Yeah. That's super helpful. Okay. I keep getting distracted. Raising children while I'm still growing up. The dad chapter. That one is huge for me. So let's just spend a minute or two there.
Sure.
Because that is such a wild thing. Like, I am raising 3 human beings that I hope like wildly surpass anything I've ever been in life. Like, I want them to be better. I want them to be more loving. I want them to accomplish more. I want them to be happier with themselves. Like, I want them to do so much, right? And I'm still growing up. I'm 37. I think we're around the same age, right? Like, I'm
37.
I'm 37. I've already done a lot of cool stuff in my life. I have a lot of cool stuff to come. But like, I am still figuring it out each and every day. So I think all the time, like, my wife she's 10 times better of a parent than I am. And I constantly like submit to her, like, hey, help me. Like, I'm bad at this. Like, I have a shorter fuse. I'm busier. I was similar in that regard before the pandemic. I'm a double extrovert. And so I love to be with people, was always out of the house, traveling to and from, doing projects, and then all of a sudden I'm, and you talked about your 2,000 square foot house. We live in a 985 square foot house. It's in the middle of Nashville, right? So there's nowhere for me to go. Like, I am sitting in my shed right now, my dingy, like, cinder block shed. And I had to make it my office because I was like, I can't go anywhere for however long this lasts. And so it's truly been like, this whole idea of how do I raise kids and point them in the right direction while I'm still trying to tell myself which direction is the right direction. So help me, help us, because I know you're going through it as well. So how do you work through that in your life?
And first of all, and you the one thing you brought up is, even in that 2,000 square foot house, it was big, and yet still felt small, right?
100%.
And so my heart goes out. So many people are living in less than even what you have, right? And yet they're figuring out how to have kids. And look, man, I think the key to raising kids while you're still growing up is being willing to make mistakes in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the purpose. That's the purpose of that book, or that chapter, especially, is, my dad is amazing. He's an amazing man, but he was never taught to show his humanity. He was taught to be impervious and to never show weakness. And so and even though he was emotional and cried and showed love and told me he loved me, he did so many things right. The thing he did wrong was he never let me in. And so I was, as a kid, having to have intuition about where he was struggling or how he messed up or what was going on financially. And I could have had so many less fuck ups in my life had he just been open and honest with me about his fuck ups.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think that's the key is we have this idea of parenthood and fatherhood, especially you got to read all these books and you got to get ready. And then, we don't want to mess up our kids, but that's impossible. We're going to mess up our kids because we're all messed up.
Yep.
There's not a person on this planet, the Dalai Lama, who isn't messed up. And by the way, the Dalai Lama isn't married and he doesn't have kids. So he might be perfect. He might be the spiritual guru of the world. Give him a life partner and 2 children.
And
And
all
let me
that's
see
gone.
how,
All
and let
that's
me see
gone.
how he
Yeah,
does.
100%.
Monks are awesome. Jay Shetty is one of my dear friends. Monks are fantastic. Come on down here, monks, and raise my kids for me.
Yeah.
You know, like this idea that like there's this spiritual way or perfection or way to do it and not mess, it doesn't exist. And we're always going to mess up our kids because all we're doing as parents is trying to heal the trauma that we experience as children. And the goal is to do everything we can to not pass on that same trauma. And so the more we're aware of it, the more we're aware of how we were messed up as children, the more we can see in our parenting styles how repeating the same cycle and messing up our children the same way that we were messed up. So the key is simple. It starts with awareness. We just have to be aware. Now, the huge thing for me, and the thing that I'm practicing that my dad didn't do for me, is also then not trying to be perfect, not not trying to get it right in that way of like, oh, I can't. We don't want to show the kids this. For us, when my wife and I lose it, we don't lose it very often. When my wife and I get into like heated arguing matches and the kids are around, I don't stop.
Yep.
And what we say is, you know what, Daddy's very upset right now, but it doesn't mean that I don't love Mommy. And I'm not disrespecting Mommy. And Mommy's getting very upset with Daddy.
Right.
Because Daddy said something stupid.
Yep.
Actually, we try not to say stupid because we call that the S word because the kids repeat it. But in general, it's real time learning. It's the same thing that I'm doing on Man Enough. We have to be okay with showing our humanity. And part of showing our humanity is being brave enough to be vulnerable and show that we don't have the answers, that we're fucking up, that we're learning in real time, that Mommy and Daddy don't have it all figured out. When Daddy's struggling, when he's stressed, he can talk about it with the kids, even when they're 5 years old.
Yep.
Because the kids need to know that if they get stressed, it's okay. The problem happens in our children when they think that they're not allowed, there's no space to feel human.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have it modeled. Yep. So they go through life and they have these feelings, and in the back of their minds, they didn't see their mommy or daddy go through that, or daddy told them not to cry, or get back on the horse and all these things. And so they feel like they have to do that. So what do they do with all the shit they're feeling? It goes right back to the conversation we had earlier. So that's the big thing for me, is being willing to be brave enough to be vulnerable and imperfect in front of my children, because what I don't want is for them to ever feel like there's a barrier between them and me. Like I am evolved or above them, or I'm a superhero. In that chapter, I talk about the superheroes fall from grace. Mm-hmm. Every one of us at one point in our lives have experienced the fall from grace, either early in childhood or as an adult of our parents. And what I argue is that they need to fall into grace. By falling into grace as parents, we are falling into our humanity. We don't ever have to fall. There's no pedestal that we're on. We're equal.
I love it.
And my children can see my flaws and in turn be okay with theirs. And we can meet on a human level. And I hope, if I do this right, that will create a friendship at one point.
Yes.
Versus this dynamic, this invisible barrier that so oftentimes keeps us away from our children, or keeps our children away from us, because we don't know how to, once they're not our kids anymore, we can't control them. There's this thing that like prevents intimacy. And I crave intimacy with my parents. And so I'm trying to heal that intimacy. I'm trying to heal that stuff to recreate that intimacy that I had when I was a kid. But now it's from a human perspective. So my dad calls me when he's struggling now. Wow. And it's changing our relationship because I've been begging him. I'm like, let me see the parts of you that you're ashamed of. Wow. Let me see the parts of you that you struggled with. Dad, if you would have told me you were struggling financially or you made a mistake, I wouldn't have bought a house at 23 and had to go into foreclosure at 25. Because you would have told me and prepared me that you screwed up. But he hid his mess ups, like so many parents do, to protect our children and protect our egos and protect this idea that we are the savior. We're the parent. We know what's best. I think the best way to parent a kid is by showing them, as my therapist says, our dirty, rotten selves, and letting them know how imperfect we are, but we're trying. And we can model that behavior by showing up, by learning, by reading books, by asking our friends, by talking to other parents, asking what's working for them, and also the taking refuge in community. Because like parents
Yeah.
also right now,
Yeah.
like I don't believe like Western civilization, we're totally backwards.
Yes, we are.
Like look at the indigenous cultures. Look at look at Africa and and these Latin American countries today. They parent in communities,
Yes,
and they're so much happier because here we are stuck in our houses in a patriarchal society where generally the women are doing all of the work.
Yep.
And suffering and we have men we can't even do the fucking laundry.
Yep.
And women are raising our children, and we're off suffering in our own ways, thinking we have to do all this work, but no one's happy. We have to rely on community too. So then it's like reaching out and talking to other parents and being together and bringing people in excuse me, and looking and learning from other people versus just thinking that we're going to do our best. Because then that's when we disconnect. That's when we're not present. That's when we lose ourselves with sports and ESPN and turn that shit on and just lose ourselves in the game and don't want to be bothered and have our beer. That's what our parents did. Yep. That's when we lose ourselves now today in our iPhones and on Instagram and TikTok and social media. They're distractions to keep ourselves from feeling. When in reality, if we allow ourselves to feel, and we allow our children to see us feel, then not only are we healing from our own wounds from our childhood, but we're preventing theirs.
Oh God, we don't have enough time. There's so much I want to say, but that was just super. I mean, that was a sermon right there, brother. That was a sermon that I needed. Falling into grace is this tremendous idea, right? That I think we would all be much better off. And yeah, I mean, we're trying to do that with our kid. I'll just say this briefly, and then we'll move on and close our time together today. We're trying to do that with our kids, man. Like I fuck up in front of my kids all the time. And we intentionally chose, that's a very intentional thing. Like we need to do this so they'll always feel comfortable coming to us when they fuck up, right? And the reason that I'm even extra okay with fucking up in front of them is because they have seen me apologize to them, to get down on their level, and no excuses. I am so sorry for what I said, what I did. That was not right. And I see the fruit of that each and every day in them, the way that they deal with stuff.
You're teaching them when you do that, you're teaching them that you made a mistake, that it's okay to make mistakes. And you're also teaching them how to apologize and take accountability for their mistakes. And that's really important. That's what, I mean, those are two secrets to life right there.
Yeah.
Making a mistake and taking accountability of it and apologizing for it. Do those things, we'll have a lot less divorces.
Hell yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Totally agree.
It's really cool, man.
Let's wrap up with this. You are part of the Baha'i faith.
Yeah.
I am a Christian, a very reluctant Christian these days, because many of my brothers and sisters are the worst perpetrators of the most horrible things we see in society, and it's really hard to be a Christian these days. But I've always said this.
It's hard to be any. It's hard to be any religion. We have messed up religion to such a massive extent. But I know the core of what you're getting at. Yeah.
But I feel like, I know at this point in my life, I've met some really incredible Baha'i people. I mean, Rain and Holiday and Gulreez and Devin. I know Gulreez, and like, there's just so many amazing Baha'i. Rain introduced me to a couple people here in Nashville, and I've just had. It feels like if I was to ever leave Christianity, it would be for the Baha'i faith. Here's why. It seems. Well, first of all, it's really beautiful and it feels very peaceful. But also, the Baha'i people that I know don't take it so seriously. Not in that they do take it seriously as a faith, but they don't take who they are so seriously that a lot of the things that have happened in religion, when you take everything so seriously and you act like you figured it out and this holy book you're holding is the end all be all to all things forever, that's when things start to fall apart. And I don't see that in the Baha'i faith. Maybe I'm wrong, and we don't have enough time to really parse that out. But I guess I wanted to end with this. How has the Baha'i faith held you and kept you and kind of prepared you for this work that you're doing now with Man Enough?
Well, I mean, it's the only reason I'm doing the work. I'd be a terrible person if it were not for the Baha'i faith. I would have been sucked into all of the worst aspects of masculinity. You know, I'd be filled with toxicity. And what the Baha'i faith, and look, the Baha'i faith has all of these principles that really help one govern their existence, right? And the same invisible forces and rules of masculinity, the Baha'i faith has its own invisible kind of forces and rules that really are there to guide us. And one of the keys for me is the independent investigation of truth. And that's one of the main principles of the Baha'i faith, which is so cool if you think about it, which means that one cannot learn without investigating truth. You don't just adapt something or adopt something because your mom and dad said it or did it, or because this person over there told you to, right? That's like retweeting an article before you read it. Yep. You don't just do it. You have to actually investigate truth for yourself. And what I love about that is it applies to everything. It applies to our own faith. It applies to policy and politics and life and work. And also it applies for me into looking and questioning masculinity and investigating what it means to actually be a man, where that comes from. And it's given me the permission to ask questions. So, at the end of the day, for me, the faith, if it can be distilled down to something, it's about service and love. And you can't perform service without love. So it's really distilled down to love. And the idea that all of us are here to serve. We're here to serve each other.
Yes.
That's the core of all of it. Even when we disagree, even in disagreement, we're told as Baha'is to be of service. Even if there's something that, one could think was contradictory to something that we believe in, we're told, if that person is suffering, you go lay your life down for that person. Well, that changes everything. I mean,
everything.
Then forget about it. So we might disagree on something, but I love you enough to take a bullet for you. That's the Baha'i faith.
Yeah.
And so like, it's just been, it gives you perspective. And I think one of the things you might be picking up on from the Baha'is, is the purpose of this life is to prepare us for the next one. So we're all in the womb. All of us are basically in the womb. This world is the matrix. This world is the womb. And we're developing our arms and our ears and our eyes and all of these things that we need. But we're developing the spiritual versions for the next world. Because how long were we in the womb when we were babies? 9 months, 10 months? Yeah. We didn't want to build a life there. You didn't build a house there. No. You were just there developing shit. And then you were born out of that world because this one's way better. The Baha'is believe the same thing. We're in the womb. We're in this like dark, shitty place right now. And where we're going is going to be way better. But we need to develop stuff before we get there.
Yeah.
So what you experience is like Baha'u'llah says that, this life is as significant as the black of an eye of a dead ant. All in the material world, all of this stuff means as much as the black of an eye of a dead ant. It wasn't enough for him to just say an ant. He said the black of an eye, and then he said the ant's dead. That's how much this crazy. World means, right? Yeah. So there's an element of detachment that one has to have with this world. And with all of these things, with money, with fame, with success, with all of this stuff, because it doesn't mean anything. In fact, we're told it's all a barrier to true happiness and spirituality. All of the things, all of it actually gets in the way. Those who suffer the most are the ones who attain the most perfection, Abdul Baha says. And that's what we need in the next world. So the purest of the Baha'is are the ones that are like, hey, bring it on.
Yeah,
I'm in the spiritual gym right now. All right. I'm doing my reps. I'm punching. I'm like, let's go. I'm here to work out because where I'm going next, I'm going to need those muscles. So that's why I'm willing to look at this and say, hey, I want to question this shit. This is broken. Can we just talk about it and fix it? I don't have the answers, but I want to be brave enough to say that I don't know. And I want to ask questions, and I want to bring people in that are smarter than me. Let's deconstruct this thing, and maybe we can make people or help people see something that they couldn't see before. And maybe we can all be a little bit happier. At the end of the day, it's about service. The second it stops being about service for me, I can't do it anymore. If it's too much about money, or if it's too much about, my own stuff, it's done. It's dead. I might as well move on to something else. And so at its core, everything I touch, the reason I'm so passionate about the things that I touch is because it's about service. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm going to do it perfectly. It doesn't mean that I have all the answers. It doesn't mean that I am not subject to the impurity and the ego. But the Baha'i faith has given me the tools to at least look at that and be willing to be man enough, if we can call it back to that, to humble myself and say, man, I better work on that. That is my ego. That's my insistent self coming up. That's my shit. That's not even me. That's my trauma. That's from my childhood. Whew. And then be man enough to apologize. And then for me, pray for the strength to do better. And every day in the Baha'i faith, we're told to take account of our actions, take account of our deeds, and to pray for the strength to repeat the good things and to ask God for the strength to do better for the things that maybe would not be pleasing to God. But every day we got to do that. So you put the previous day behind you, you put on your shoes, right? As a man, you put on your boots and you get up and you try again, and you're going to fail. It's not going to be perfect, but that's okay, because this is the place to be imperfect. So long as we're trying, and we're trying to be of service, and we believe in something greater than ourselves, that's what brings you back, man. That's the thing. That's the key ingredient, that this life, all of this shit doesn't mean anything. It's the stuff that we can't take with us when we die. The money, all the material possessions, that's the stuff that gets in the way of the stuff that we actually need to take with us.
That is an excellent note to end this conversation on. We didn't get to talk about Wayfarer Foundation, Skid Row Carnival of Love, all the other stuff that you have done and will continue to do. Maybe in 2 or 3 more years, we'll do a round 2, right? It'll take us 2 or 3 more years to get this on the calendar. This conversation will come out April 27, also the day that your book launches. Again, we'll push people to buy it. Incredible work. And speaking of man enough, I am man enough to say that you are a fucking gorgeous human being inside and out.
Thank you, buddy.
And I'm so grateful for the time we've had today. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for creating this space to talk. Thanks for the podcast. I give a damn.
That's the show today, my friends. Thank you for spending some time with Justin and me. To learn more about Justin Baldoni, just go Google its name because he's fucking famous. But seriously, go to manenough.com to learn more about the new book coming out next week and so much more. Please visit letsgiveadamn.com to learn more about all things Let's Give a Damn. This next year is going to be crazy. We're building some amazing things, and I want you to be a part of them. I want you to be in the loop. So letsgiveadamn.com for more. Thank you for showing up today. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. Chad, Jess, and the team at Sound On Studios made this episode. The music is by our friend Propaganda. You can reach out anytime and for any reason at hello@letsgiveadamn.com. I love you all. Be safe. Keep giving a damn. Bye for now.